Good morning and welcome to the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections. My name is Keith Powers and I'm the chair of this committee. Before we begin the hearing today, I'd like to introduce the council members of this committee who have joined us today. We're joined here by our speaker, Adrian Adams, Councilmember Justin Brannan, Councilmember Gail Brewer, Councilmember Sylvina Brooks Powers, Councilmember Crystal Hudson, and Councilmember Parina Sanchez. I'd also like to acknowledge our staff who are here with us today. Rules Committee Counsel to my right, Lance Polovy, and staff members of the Council's Investigative Unit, Chuck Davis, Chief Compliance Officer, and investigators Alicia Vassell and Ramses Boudin. Today, the Rules Committee will consider the nominations of Justice Sylvia Hines-Radix for appointment to the position of Corporation Counsel and Jocelyn Straber for Commissioner of the Department of Investigations. If the Council gives its advice and consent, Justice Hines-Radix will be appointed Corporation Counsel and serve an indefinite term at a salary of $243,272. Ms. Straber would also serve an indefinite term. Her salary as DOI Commissioner would be $237,240. The New York City Charter designates the Corporation Counsel as the attorney and counsel for the city and all city agencies. The Corporation Counsel, and by extension, the Law Department, is granted the power to conduct all of the law business of the City of New York. Further, the Corporation Counsel shall have the right to bring or defend any legal action in local, state, or federal courts. The Law Department is comprised of approximately 1,000 attorneys who specialize in all types of law that may be necessary to conduct the legal business of the City of New York. The Law Department includes specialists in a wide range of fields of litigation, land use, ethics, professional responsibility, contracts, administrative law, juvenile delinquency, and legislative interpretation, just to name quite a few. They represent the city elected officials and city agencies with any and all legal issues they may confront. The appointment for the Corporation Counsel, the mayor must submit the name of a nominee for Corporation Counsel within 60 days of a vacancy to the City Council for its advice and consent. We are going to start with the Corporation Counsel here today, and we welcome Justice Hines-Radix. If you please raise your hand to be sworn in. And I think we're just waiting for our committee counsel to do such swearing in. Okay. Okay, I think we're waiting 1 minute. Technical difficulties with the streaming, so just if you'll bear with us.
Your Honor, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Raise your right, hold on 1 second. Just please raise your right hand to be sworn in. Thanks.
Justice Hines-Radix, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you, and welcome, and congratulations on your nomination. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Speaker Adams, Chairman Powers, and members of the Rules, Privilege, and Elections Committee for affording me the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Associate Justice Sylvia Hines-Radix, and I am honored to be Mayor Adams' nominee for the position of Corporation Counsel of the City of New York. Standing before you today, I am humbled by the vital role of the City Council in the nomination process, and I look forward to answering your questions. I have spent my entire legal career as a public servant, fighting for the rights of the underserved and ensuring that the law in the state of New York was implemented with justice and fairness. Upon graduating from law school, my first position as an attorney was with District Council 37 employees, Municipal Employees Legal Services. The city's employees were our clients, and I got to represent them in numerous areas of the law. During my 16 years at DC 37, one of the many titles I held was General Counsel of the Immigration Program, a program which I founded. I represented clients in immigration and other courts and assisted them with the preparation of paperwork to ensure they fulfill their dreams of becoming United States citizens. I, too, am familiar with the process of running for office, as I was elected to the Civil Court and the Supreme Court benches. My campaign for Civil Court afforded me the opportunity to connect with the residents of Brooklyn in a way I had not before. Talking to people and hearing of the struggles they encountered on an everyday basis allowed me to see the world from their perspective. With the knowledge I gained from DC 37 and throughout the campaigns, I knew that my voice was needed to ensure that justice was served for those who came through the court system. I was elected in 2001 as a judge of the Civil Court, and after 6 months, and during when my judicial career began, I was reassigned to the criminal court. I have built my career in the judiciary on the basis of fairness, justice, and equality for those who have appeared before me. When I was elected to the Supreme Court in 2004, I had the distinct privilege of sitting in the city park for approximately 2 years. I heard thousands of cases defended by the law department on issues from personal injury to labor law and everything in between. I recall being highly impressed by the arguments presented by the attorneys representing the city during that time. I learned of the challenges faced by the law department, was cognizant of the fact that they worked tirelessly for the residents of this great city. In addition to the city part, my judicial duties included, but were not limited to, foreclosures, guardianships, mental hygiene, matrimonial, as well as a trial part. While in the Supreme Court, I was appointed as the administrative judge for civil matters. In that capacity, I oversaw both the Supreme Court civil term and the New York City Civil Court, which also encompassed the Housing Court. I supervised both judicial and non-judicial staff of approximately 1,200 employees in one court, and some 800 in the criminal court. This administrative role encompassed many facets, including keeping track of trial statistics and caseload, ensuring that our monthly trial schedules were being met, supervising court back offices and support staff, including court officers, court clerks, and administrative staff. During my tenure at the Supreme Court, I saw the opening of a new wing at 360 Adams, which included new courtrooms, jury rooms, conference rooms, and new office space for large departments, all of which I had the responsibility to oversee in addition to my judicial responsibilities on the bench. In November of 2012, I was appointed as an Associate Justice of the Appellate Division, 2nd Department, which is the second highest court and is the busiest of the 4 appellate divisions in the state. We hear cases on appeal from 10 counties across the state on myriad issues from criminal, civil, family, and surrogates court, as well as the Court of Claims. It has been an honor and a pleasure to serve with some of the best and hardest working people that the New York State Judiciary has to offer. It is my opinion that my legal training as an attorney, as a trial judge, and as an Associate Justice of the Appellate Division for over 35 years has aptly prepared me to undertake this role if confirmed by you. It has always been my view in life to evaluate the complexities of a situation, always being guided by the facts, the law, and listening to the information provided. I am always mindful of the rule of law and the need for these pieces to work if we are to have a just and equitable society. As the mayor noted, I am the first African-American Caribbean female nominee for this position, having been born in Barbados, a small island in the Caribbean. I was raised by hardworking parents who instilled in my siblings and I the importance of being honest, humble, and courteous. I am acutely aware that I stand on the shoulders of many who have paved the way for me to come before you today, and I am excited to take on a new challenge in my legal career if confirmed by you and given the opportunity to do so. And I thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to recognize Speaker Adrian Adams, who may wish to make an opening statement and ask some questions.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader Powers. Good morning, Justice Hines Radix. Very nice to see you in person today.
Good morning,
And
Madam
welcome.
Speaker.
I just have a couple questions for you. In your response to question 13 in the questionnaire, which I will read, the question was, how do you interpret the powers of Section 395 of the City Charter with respect to the reporting and placement of agency attorneys? Do you agree that this section does not apply to the City Council? And your response was, Section 395 instructs the Law Department and other city agencies as to when agency counsel may be retained and must be read in conjunction with the role of the Corporation Counsel in other charter sections. The City Council, as a co-equal branch of government, has a unique role under the City Charter and has historically selected its own legal staff to assist with its ordinary legislative duties, and I do not anticipate any dispute concerning this practice. So my question is, in light of your answer on the difference between agency counsels and the City Council's lawyers, how can you assure us that when our powers are at issue or in other circumstances where the counsel is your client, we will have a relationship that recognizes this and doesn't treat the counsel's input and participation as if our lawyers are just an extension of the law department, as may be the case with other agency attorneys?
Madam Speaker, that is not my intent. I am acutely aware of the position of the City Council as a co-equal branch of government, and as an elected officials, I am aware of the deference that should be afforded. If I am confirmed, my position will always be that you're treated with the respect that is required of your office, and that your staff is treated in that manner also. So that is an assurance that I can give in that instance.
Thank you very much. Just one more question for you. For question 14. Question 14 was, do you think it is ever appropriate for the law department to argue that the city was preempted, in quotes, that the city through its local legislative body is precluded by state or federal law from legislating on a certain matter, from passing a duly enacted local law when there is a colorable argument that the city has such power? Your response was, quote, to argue against the validity of a city law may not be in the city's best interest, and therefore it is usually inadvisable for any city official to espouse a position that may be a diminution of the city's powers. However, in my view, it would be inappropriate for a corporation counsel or corporation counsel nominee to make blanket statements about any future legal positions. So my question is, how can you assure us that any future consideration of arguing preemption against a local law will center on the best long-term interests of the city, and that as the legislative body of the City Council will be involved in those decisions?
And Madam Speaker, I can assure you that I will always do what is in the best interest of the city. The Corporation Counsel is the city's attorney. And I can assure you, irrespective of the fact that I do not think it wise for a nominee to make a blanket statement about future litigation, I can always assure you of the process of open communication, and the fact that there will always be an open communication and notification to you, because you're also a client.
Thank you very much. And I do have one more, and they all have the same theme, as you see. So question 17 was, do you think it is ever appropriate for the law department to argue that the city lacks the home rule authority to act in a certain area where there is a colorable argument that the state legislature cannot act without a home rule request from the city. Your response was, I do not believe that it is appropriate to prejudge how I would handle a particular matter. I think the best and most effective way to handle this would be with an analysis of the issue, and then I can make a determination upon the city's best interest and the potential impact. So my follow-up question to that, to give you an example, if the city had for decades considered the issuance of taxi medallions a matter of local control, would it be appropriate for the law department to suddenly argue that the state can act without a home rule message because the city needs the money to plug a hole in the budget? And even if there were a situation where this could conceivably be appropriate, what type of engagement process in making such a decision would you envision for non-mayoral partners in government, such as the council, whose powers this could also affect?
Can I ask you to repeat the question,
Sure.
Madam Speaker?
Sure.
Quite involved.
Sure. To give context, I was giving your response to whether or not it was appropriate for the law department to argue that the city lacks the home rule authority to act in a certain area, all right?
Right.
Where there's a colorable argument that the state legislature can't act without a home rule request from the city. And your response to that question was that you didn't believe that it was appropriate to prejudge how you would handle a particular matter, and you thought that the best and most effective way to handle it would be with an analysis of the issue. And then you would be able to best make a determination. I'm paraphrasing.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done. And the analysis of the issue should be an analysis that involved the kind of analysis that you would have with the city council and agencies. It's not an exclusive. I believe that in order for us to be able to move forward, there has to be communication. And in order to make any kind of analysis that would be beneficial, there has to be communication across the board. And I think that's what we have here. I am quite familiar with the situation that you talked about, and I do not think that it would be appropriate for me to take a position on the issue before with the medallion. But I can always assure you that the requisite communication and analysis that is supposed to go into any of these situations is something that I will be willing to do, and be willing to have the kind of communication with you and have the feedback in order to make determinations that are in the best interests of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you answered the sorry.
I just want to clarify, broader plans, legal and policy disagreements between the mayor and the council.
Just to follow up to the follow-up, what I'm trying to get to is that because we are a co-equal branch of government with the mayor's office, the type of engagement process for making the decisions, and we're saying, and we're hearing communication, how would you necessarily envision that engagement process for making these determinations for non-mayoral partners in government, like us, like this body and the council, whose powers are also affected?
Well, look, Madam Speaker, I have not been a corporation counsel, but I'm fully aware that attorneys have communication and that there's counsel from the city, and I expect that communication should be had with the attorneys at the Corporation Council, that these issues should be ironed out. I am also fully aware that there are sometimes that issues cannot be resolved between councils, and I believe that the Corporation Council, based on the proviso of the charter, should make the final determination as to how these issues should be handled.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I also want to recognize we've been joined here by Councilmember Salamanca as well. Welcome. And thank you for those questions. I'm going to have some follow-ups here as well. Thanks for your testimony. You know, as you might recall, we were here just about less than a year ago to consider the nomination of Georgiana Pastana for Corporation Counsel, and a few of us were here on the Rules Committee as well. The questions we asked about were the institutional role of the law department in disputes regarding the legal position of the city, and believing those are important to establish a strong working relationship. And as we're at the beginning of a new term with a new mayor and a new speaker, of course, another good opportunity to discuss the role of the Corporation Counsel as a lawyer of the city, and certainly the interaction between the different branches of government when it comes to the Corporation Counsel. So a few questions. The first one is, in response to questions about conflicts between the mayor and the council regarding the legal position of the city of New York, you indicated that ultimately the Corporation Counsel decides the legal position of the city. I agree with you on that, but a couple questions to follow up on that. I guess we're trying to determine what principles will guide you in making those determinations about deciding the legal position when there may be a conflict between the mayor and the city council in terms of our positions. And secondly, what would you do if a mayoral agency did not comply with a duly issued subpoena from the city council?
Well, the Corporation Counsel, and as I stated, Mr. Chair, is not the attorney for the mayor. It's not just the attorney for the city council, just the attorney for the agencies, but it's the attorney for the city of New York. I will always be guided by ensuring that the interest of the city of New York is protected. And the analysis that I make will be the first analysis that I make as I do that. Not that it's going to be beneficial to the mayor, but it's going to be beneficial to the city of New York.
And just be more specific to the second question. What would you, if a mayoral agency is not complying with the duly issued subpoena, can you just tell us what steps, from the city council, can you tell us what steps you might take or how you might approach that?
My advice would, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to say what I would say to another client, but my advice will always be to the administration and anyone has to follow the rule of law.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Just to provide a clarity on the first part of the question, first part of the answer rather, if you believe the city council has a stronger argument, legal argument than the mayor in a conflict between the mayor and the city council, are you, I want to clarify that you will then state that the city, will you uphold the city council's position if you believe it has a stronger legal position than the?
I will always go with the argument that is in the best interest of the city. If it's the city council's argument that is the best interest of the city, that's the position that I will have to take, but it has to be in what is in the best interest of the city of New York.
Okay. I appreciate that. And the example that was used earlier by the speaker with the taxi medallion, that is not a hypothetical, that is a real example that happened about 10 years ago where we eroded the home rule authority of the city council with, in pursuit of a plan from the mayor. And so I think that's a real life example. But we have, in the city council ourselves, have experienced a number of issues with the law department related to basic client services as a client. If confirmed, do you commit to creating a new training or to refine existing training programs?
I missed what you said.
Sorry.
Do I commit?
If confirmed,
Thank you.
will you commit to creating a new training or to refine the existing training programs on basic client services regarding the role of the council and our desire to be a close partner on all litigation matters involving the city council? And what I might ask, in addition to that, will you also commit to meeting with our legal staff to discuss ways to be a better partner and to work together?
If confirmed, that will be one of the first things I would want to do, to meet with your staff, to have a discussion of the issues that are of concern for you. and to find out how we can better work together. I believe that it would be foolhardy not to have any kind of training to see what is there. First, I have to have an analysis of what is there, make a determination of what is working and what is not working, and after I've done that, make the necessary changes and make sure the attorneys are aware of the ethical obligations to their clients.
Okay. I have a couple more questions. I'll ask one, and then I'll move on to some members and come back as needed. Can you describe the process by which you would determine whether to defend a duly enacted law? For example, if the mayor vetoes a bill of the city council and we override that veto, can you tell us how you would handle that? Will you defend the city law if the council still wishes to defend it against a veto? And tell us how you might approach, similar theme here, conflict between branches of government, council passes a law, how will your approach be in terms of duly defending that duly enacted law?
Well, I know, and attorneys know that there is a presumption of validity of a law. If it's a valid law, the Corporation Council should defend it.
Okay. I have a few more, but I'm going to let some colleagues ask questions, and I'll play cleanup if needed. Do we have? Okay. We're going to head over, I think, to Councilmember Brewer to start, and then we'll take sign-ups from other folks as well.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the fact that you reached out not just to us, but to the previous corporation councils. They really appreciated that. And one of the questions I have, obviously what the speaker asked, I think we're all interested in, but I'm also, looking at the budget, do you have some ideas about how to get people not to sue the city? So that there are, obviously, when they do, your department handles that. But there's always been a hope that we could find ways to be less a city that sues all the time. So I know it's not necessarily a legal question, but I'm wondering if you've had any thoughts about that. Because I know some of the previous corporation councils did. Well,
one of the things that I think the Corporation Council implemented something, as I had been discussing with them, the risk management unit, so that those issues that are pervasive, that there can be a discussion about those issues, so we could stave them off before they become lawsuits. Look at agencies or where things are going on that we can make agency heads aware of and try to see whether they're bad actors and whether and how they could deal with these bad actors to ensure that the situations that cause lawsuits, that we could stave them off.
okay, and I think that's something important because it's not been satisfactorily accomplished, but there have been attempts in the past. The other question I have is, maybe you addressed it when you, Councilmember Powers, but the training and the retention, because you're not going to make a fortune in Corp Counsel as an attorney, but you are certainly going to get great experience, and we want that experience to last because it's so important for our city. So what suggestions, maybe given your past, would you have for retention of these great attorneys?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing that we have in the Corp Council is that an attorney who leaves law school and go to a law firm will probably not get to do a deposition or have a trial for years. But this situation exists as you go into the city because of our volume and because of how the participation that is given to these attorneys, and that is something that we have to be able to play. One of the other things that, if I were confirmed, that I would like to do is to have discussions with deans at law schools to be able to go out and encourage some of our attorneys from the Corporation Counsel to go out to speak to young lawyers who are now in law school, who are being trained, to tell them about the Corporation Counsel, to tell them to tell them about the work that they do. There are a lot of people who are committed to civil service. When I got out of law school, I wanted to be a civil servant. I didn't want to go to a law firm, and there are lots of people that are committed to doing that. And I think if we get the message out about our agency and the work that we do, and the wonderful partners that we have, equal branches of government who do all of these things, that this would be an ability to be able to retain some of the people that come to us.
Okay. And then picking up on what the excellent questions from the speaker, this issue, I was the borough president previously, and we did work on some cases where we were in conflict with the mayor. And we were able to hire outside counsel that then was paid for by the law department. So my question is, again, sort of picking up on what the speaker suggested, obviously it's not just a city council, you have other independently elected. And what do you have any sense of how you would make those decisions about when there was a conflict? Or is that something, as you said earlier, it would be case by case?
I believe it has to be on a case-by-case basis. There couldn't be a blanket what we're going to do, because without the facts before me and the analysis of what has happened between either the agency and the mayor and the council, there couldn't be a determination unless I have a specific case.
It's going to come up more and more, would be my guess, just for your information.
I'm sorry?
It's going to come up more and more.
I'm quite sure.
So you might have that as thinking about it as a priority. Then finally, I know that this mayoral override, I know when we discuss it, it's not something that most people know about, but I dealt with it as borough president, working with the de Blasio administration, and it was very unclear as to how the mayor makes a decision. Basically, a mayoral override in our case was, we're not going to do the zoning, we're going to do it our way. And of course, there's only one industry in New York City, it's called real estate. And when that comes up in a political context, it's always controversial. So I guess what I'm saying to you is on the issues like mayoral override, we would need some transparent guidelines as to what determines a mayoral override. And I assume that would fall in the hands of the Corporation Counsel.
And Council Member Gabor, I believe in transparency. And I am not, as I said to Council Member Powers, I'm not fully familiar with the document that was referred to on override, but I can commit to you that should I be confirmed, I will work to ensure that I'm fully familiar with it, and you as a client will be entitled to whatever information with reference to this that is not privileged.
It'll come up on real estate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just wanted to add on to that last point, because it's an issue that was raised, obviously, in the press as well, which I know you're familiar with on the zoning override. It may or may not fall entirely in your jurisdiction as Corporation Counsel to display and provide us the sort of entirety of the policy around the administration or any administration's goals or guidance when it comes to mayoral override. It is one of the strongest powers the City Council has, is the ability to impact and affect decisions around land use, and I think both for the administration and for the Corporation Council, it would be a good policy, and it'd be an important policy for us to have a better understanding of what those, how the guidance is issued and what are the policies. And I assume some of it is discretionary at the for the administration to make decisions about importance of factors. But I also believe there is a Corporation Counsel role and guidance or memos that help. And we have, I think, to date, not been able to see those. So I would, not a question, but I would encourage and implore yourself and the administration to come to the council and give us a little bit of better guidance of when, if there is available documents for us to share those with us, but also to provide us with clarity of explanation. I've also raised that to the other folks in the administration as well, because it does often intersect with one of our primary powers. I will now hand it over to Majority Whip Selvina Brooke Powers.
Thank you, and thank you for your opening remarks, Judge. I just have one brief question. I'm interested in understanding how you would handle lawsuits before the city in terms of the public. Oftentimes, the city is in positions where they have to decide to settle out in cases and how that is handled, because sometimes it's a pretty extensive process, and so I'm interested in how you would handle a situation like that.
If you're talking about the settlement process, the charter sets out for settlement of claims with the Comptroller's Office and in conjunction with the Corporation Counsel. And if you're talking about if the case goes on, you're talking about a case that goes on, that goes through a court process?
So just in terms of the process in itself, but also in the instance where there's a settlement to be reached, how would you handle it under your leadership in that office? Well,
Settlements are going to be, by negotiation and by an evaluation of the case, what has happened. I think primarily, if there's a case and there is the perception by the Corporation Counsel or by the lawyers that this is a case where a citizen has been harmed and that we have some responsibility, that a determination should be made early to get rid of the case and in the best interest of the city, rather than just a continued litigation that may be perceived as being frivolous.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have other members who wanted to ask questions? Councilor Sanchez.
So good morning.
Good morning, Councilor.
Judge, it's very good to see you in person this time. Thank you for taking the time for an early conversation yesterday.
And thank you for speaking with me.
Of course. So my first question is regarding as we talked about yesterday, the broad purview, of course, that the law department has with so many different city agencies. Can you tell us a little bit about what your philosophy will be in terms of working with agency councils, and in particular, my interest in seeing the city of New York be a little bit more aggressive in terms of affirmative litigation, especially in the area of housing, holding landlords accountable, helping to protect New Yorkers in an affirmative way, as opposed to just reactive, getting lawsuits and the different ways that we respond.
So there are two questions. So, right, Council Member? So can I'll address first your issue with affirmative litigation. And there is an affirmative litigation unit at the Corporation Counsel. Is small. I would have no reservations about extending that unit if I saw it's in the best interest of the city and their areas where affirmative litigation is needed. And you have mentioned some of them. And I would like to continue, if confirmed, that conversation with you or any member of the City Council who know of areas that they would like to be addressed, so that we can have that unit up and running and doing the types of things that would save. And we all know it could end up being, as we protect citizens, it also brings money into the city that we probably could need.
Thank you. And anything in addition to your philosophy about working with agency councils?
My goal is, and it has always been my goal, and it will continue to be my goal, to ensure that there is proper respect and communication across the board. If attorneys are able to communicate effectively, it makes it much easier with the work that we have to do. In the final analysis, we are all doing what we believe is in the best interest of the city because we love the city. So it doesn't help us to pigeonhole and say, I belong here and I belong here, and not be able to talk to each other and make the determinations that are necessary in order to ensure that the city's interest is protected.
Thank you. And my last question is following the vein of our majority leader and our speaker, and it's with respect to your answer to question 15. And the question was, the law department has previously demanded that the city council agrees to stays of city laws that the mayor disagreed with. Will you commit to not use multiple extension requests to delay the implementation of local laws in which the mayor disagrees? And your response was with respect to the process of litigation, and of course, doing what is in the best interest of the city and avoiding unnecessary delays. But my follow-up question is, in additional context where there isn't litigation and perhaps for different reasons, the mayor has requested multiple stays or delays of implementation of city law. How would you, what criteria would you use in those instances to communicate with us and to arrive at decisions about implementation?
And so I will always make sure that there's communication between your legal staff and our staff. But I always also have to be mindful. You're not asking me how I will handle a specific litigation, but how I will handle the communication back and forth. And it goes back to the whole issue that I raised before. There seems to be a question of communication and the information that should be received. And I'm very much on board with you that information should be provided to you as a co-equal branch of government, and I will always be respectful of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Hudson.
Hi there, good morning.
Good morning.
I just wanted to expand upon question 6, which asked, can you make a commitment that the law department will send copies of all draft legal papers to the appropriate city attorneys from the relevant agency or non-mayoral city entity, including the city council, at least 3 business days before they are due, with the exception of reply papers in New York State Court or unexpected time-sensitive filings that would not allow for 3 business days? You know, when the city council has major constitutional litigations, scheduling orders, stipulations, and we're given an extremely short turnaround to make comments on substantive briefs, it puts the council at a huge disadvantage. And so I'm wondering if you can make a clear commitment that the law department will provide all legal papers at least 3 business days before they're due.
Well, and the reason why 3 business days is sometimes unrealistic, but I'd like to propose this. I'd like to propose that we are working on this area and with this litigation much earlier than waiting for the last 3 days. Because if you're working with this, your staff is working with the Corporation Counsel, then your staff, if with all due respect, if you do not mind, I would like to see your staff working with the Corporation Counsel staff, because if they're working together, the necessary information that is needed in this case will not be a surprise. And that's where I would like to see us going, in a vein where collaboration is up front and not at the tail end. Because I think the reason why there are issues with not getting papers and documents is because they're at the tail end. And if we're able to cut this off, then we're able to get where we're going. But I would be hard pressed to, and it would, to some extent, be disingenuous of me to say, well, I'm going to commit to 3 days when I know that based on the volumes that it doesn't happen. But I will commit to ensure that the information and to ensure and to tell the staff, if I'm confirmed that the information has to be sent out as expeditiously as possible, and the cases like the case that you've mentioned is something that has to be highlighted and dealt with.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm sorry, Councilman.
Okay, we're going to have one more question, a follow-up question from Councilmember Sanchez.
Hi, it's actually not a follow-up question. I just wanted to shout out in advance the Administrative Law and Regulatory Litigation Division that does incredible work and is probably one of the ones that we will be interfacing the most with at the council as we negotiate legislation. So you have there is an incredible team there pending your confirmation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for taking time with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're now going to move on to the Department of Investigations.
Do I leave or do I have to stay?
What's that?
Do I have to stay or do you want?
Your choice. You are allowed to. You are allowed to leave. We're done with you. She may want some company. I don't know.
Good. Okay, I'll stay.
A little solidarity never hurt. So welcome, and thank you, and we're going to move to the Department of Investigations. We welcome you here today. Pursuant to the Charter, Chapter 2, Section 31, the mayor appoints the commissioner of the Department of Investigations upon the advice and consent of the City Council. Before taking a vote, the City Council holds a public hearing. The DOI Commissioner is authorized and empowered to conduct any study or investigation which, in the judgment of the Commissioner, are in the best interests of the City of New York. These include, but are not limited to, investigations concerning the affairs, functions, accounts, methods, personnel, and effectiveness of the city agencies over which DOI has jurisdiction. The DOI Commissioner also has a duty to conduct investigations demanded by the Mayor or the City Council. The Conflicts of Interest Board also has the power to direct DOI to conduct investigations concerning matters relating to COIB's responsibilities under Chapter 68 of the New York City Charter. Upon request, the DOI Commissioner must investigate any such council and COIB investigation demand within a reasonable time. The DOI has jurisdiction over any agency, officer, or employee of the City of New York, any person or entity doing business with the city, and any person or entity paid or receiving money from the city. DOI also has a complaint bureau which receives complaints from the public. The DOI Commissioner is also responsible for approving the appointments of New York City Agency Inspector General, IGs, and conveys the associated standards of conduct for all appointed IGs. In order to ensure uniformity of their activities, the DOI Commissioner monitors and evaluates the activities of the IGs. IGs report directly to the Department of Investigations Commissioner. The Commissioner is required to be a member in good standing of the Bar of the State of New York and must have at least 5 years of law enforcement experience. We welcome here today Ms. Strauber. Would you please raise your right hand to be sworn in?
Ms. Strauber, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Great. Thank you and welcome. Do you wish to make an opening statement? Okay, go ahead. We do recommend that.
How's that? Better.
Better.
Let me start again. Thank you, Speaker Adams, Chair Powers, Chair Brewer, and the members of the Rules Committee for the opportunity to speak with you today as Mayor Adams' nominee for the Commissioner of the Department of Investigation. My name is Jocelyn Strauber, and I'm honored to have been asked to serve as Commissioner. DOI plays a critical role in ensuring accountability, transparency, and integrity in city government, and this is a critical time for our city when good government is enormously important. DOI, which has a dual mission, is uniquely positioned to uphold that standard. Its work helps to identify and eliminate fraud, corruption, and abuse through investigations that may result in the recovery of tax dollars, criminal and civil enforcement actions, and proposals for policy and procedural reforms that can prevent future misconduct and waste of city resources. And DOI's mission is particularly compelling to me because its work supports the work of other city agencies, including those who serve the most vulnerable New Yorkers. I'm also honored to appear before you here today. This hearing is intended to ensure DOI's independence, and as a former prosecutor, I fully appreciate that independence empowers an investigative agency to follow the facts wherever they may lead and to do so fairly and impartially. This council also can direct DOI to undertake investigations, and plays its own vitally important oversight role with respect to city agencies. And I hope, if confirmed, to work in partnership with you in furtherance of our shared interest in ensuring that city government works better for all New Yorkers. I'd like to start by telling you a bit about my personal and professional background and why I believe I am qualified for this very significant role. I was born and raised in Manhattan. I've lived here nearly all of my adult life, and my husband and I are raising our 2 children here. I'm a third-generation New Yorker. My grandfather emigrated here from Europe through Ellis Island as a teenager and raised his family, including my father, in Brooklyn. My dad's enthusiasm for his litigation practice and my mother's intense focus on the importance of hard work and career led me to law school, then to 2 federal judicial clerkships, one with the late Chief Justice of the United States, William Rehnquist, and a fellowship at the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. I then returned to New York City, and after a few years at a large private law firm, I was fortunate to be hired as an assistant United States attorney for the Southern District of New York, a job I had hoped to have since law school. Working in that office, like the DOI, the oldest of its kind in the nation, I had the great privilege of working every day with dedicated colleagues and skilled law enforcement agents to make the city a safer and a more just place. I am grateful to have served for 8.5 years in an office where we followed the facts wherever they led, without fear or favor, and where we sought to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. I am also thankful for the supervisors who helped me apply those values to each case and each decision every day. That approach and those values have guided my work ever since, and if I am confirmed, they will guide my leadership of the talented and dedicated staff of DOI as well. After a few years handling investigations, trials, and appeals, I was ultimately promoted to deputy chief and then co-chief of a newly formed unit that combined the office's prosecutions of international narcotics with its prosecutions of terrorism and national security. In that capacity, I supervised over 20 prosecutors handling complex, high-profile international investigations and prosecutions, working closely with the NYPD, the FBI, the DEA, and other law enforcement agencies. During the over 4.5 years that I served as a supervisor, we charged and convicted numerous defendants on terrorism, narcotics conspiracy, and money laundering charges, among others. Many of these cases, most notably the so-called Times Square bomber, who is currently serving life in prison for seeking to detonate a car bomb in Times Square on May 1st, 2010, directly impacted the safety of this city. Both as a line prosecutor and as a supervisor, I saw firsthand the value of close working relationships between prosecutors and law enforcement agents to build cases that are factually and legally sound. DOI had a particularly strong and productive partnership with the SDNY U.S. Attorney's Office during my time there, and many significant prosecutions resulted from that relationship. I also learned to navigate complex, sensitive situations requiring the cooperation of multiple stakeholders, each of whom were duty-bound to serve varying interests. I believe this experience will serve me well if confirmed as commissioner. I will work to enhance DOI's relationships with its key law enforcement partners. I will also work in alignment with the heads of city agencies, City Hall, and this council to improve city government, and I understand the important balance between this valuable collaboration and the equally important need to maintain DOI's crucial independence. At the end of 2013, I left the U.S. Attorney's Office for private practice and have been since then with the law firm of Skadden Arps, where I am a litigation partner and have spent the last 8 years. In that capacity, I represent individuals and companies in their response to civil and criminal government investigations and prosecutions. These matters involve suspected civil and criminal fraud and corruption offenses, as well as money laundering, sanctions violations, among others. They often involve multiple regulators and law enforcement agencies and are handled under time pressure and at times intense public scrutiny. In this work, I have seen from the defense side of the table the tremendous power of government investigators and prosecutors, and how important it is that they do rigorous work, dig deeply into all the key facts, and refrain from jumping to conclusions without sufficient support. This experience has well prepared me to serve as commissioner and to guide and support the executive staff and inspectors general in the handling of complex, sensitive investigations. Through my work on these investigations, I have seen firsthand that it is critical that institutions convey a commitment to compliance at the senior-most levels, the tone at the top, and support that commitment with robust and appropriately targeted policies and procedures. I am mindful also that such processes must be compatible with the realities and the resources of the workplaces where they apply. I would bring that nuanced perspective to my work at DOI and to the policy and procedural recommendations that DOI is empowered to make. A dedication to pro bono work is a hallmark of my firm's culture, and I have maintained an active pro bono practice. For the past 2 years, I have represented indigent clients charged in criminal cases in federal court in Manhattan. In getting to know these clients, I have come to understand in a much more personal way the challenges that many faced from a young age, and that many of the most vulnerable New Yorkers face today, particularly in the ongoing COVID pandemic, poverty, domestic violence, gang violence, substance abuse, and a lack of educational opportunity. I have also been active in the firm's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and I have seen that the best workplaces are diverse and inclusive, such that people of very different backgrounds feel respected, safe, and comfortable sharing different perspectives. I believe that the best decisions are made after full consideration of truly diverse viewpoints by people working toward a common mission. And if confirmed, I intend to maintain and foster that kind of workplace at DOI. I will close by saying that I would be thrilled to have the chance to take on this role and to apply my skills and experience to the very significant work of leading this critical agency at this very important time. For me, this is an opportunity to return to public service in and for the city that I love and that has given me and my family so much, both personally and professionally. And it is an opportunity to work with this council and with other components of city government to ensure that our government better serves all New Yorkers, while preserving and protecting the independence that makes DOI so effective. Thank you for your consideration of my nomination, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, and thank you for that testimony. And I'm going to now call on Speaker Adrian Adams to ask some questions.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Good morning.
Good
Welcome.
morning, Speaker.
It's good to see you. Ms. Strober, I wanted to open by noting that in your pre-hearing questions, you described the ways in which the council's oversight functions complement those of DOI. And as the Speaker, I agree with your assessment that proper oversight can create, as you put it, quote, greater accountability, transparency, and integrity. If you're confirmed, we look forward to partnering with you in this important work. You also noted your interest in strengthening whistleblower protections, and that's a goal that I share as well. And I look forward to working with you on that important objective. In looking at your questions and answers, I'm going to go to question 10, which was, sometimes DOI investigators will not disclose anything about an investigation to the recipient of a subpoena. When issuing a subpoena to the City Council, a mayoral agency, or non-mayoral agency such as a borough president, public advocate, or comptroller, would you commit to instructing DOI investigators to provide at least a high-level overview of what is being investigated, to assist the government agency, council, or non-mayoral agency in properly responding to such a subpoena? Your response: I am reluctant to provide a blanket commitment of this nature because I think these sorts of issues are best handled on a case-by-case basis. I can envision circumstances in which sharing a high-level overview of the nature of the investigation would be appropriate, and others in which that disclosure might risk compromising an investigation. As I know this council is aware, DOI must maintain confidentiality with respect to its investigations in order to do its job effectively. I can say that in general, I believe it would be appropriate for DOI to assist any recipient of a subpoena in its response by clarifying where necessary and helpful, the nature and scope of the materials requested. That kind of dialogue would conserve the entity's resources in identifying and producing materials and ensure that DOI receives the materials that it needs. So we asked you about whether you would commit to providing at least a high-level overview when issuing subpoenas to the council regarding the nature of the investigation to assist us in gathering responsive materials to assist with your investigations. While DOI's investigatory authority is very broad, there are some limits, and it also serves as a check that an investigation is actually valid. Will you commit to working with the council to ensure at least additional dialogue about the nature of subpoenas, unless there is an extremely sensitive reason it would impede a DOI investigation?
I am certainly open. Thank you for the question, and this question and issue of how we can collaborate while maintaining the necessary confidentiality and thereby DOI's effectiveness is an important one. I am certainly committed, as I learn my way into this role, to having a dialogue with the council about the nature of the communication that we can have. As you noted in my answer, my concern is that these can be very fact-specific situations where different types of information may or may not be appropriate depending on the facts. And I am certainly committed to have a dialogue about this issue, and I look forward to finding a way forward where DOI can continue to protect the confidentiality of its work and, where appropriate, provide the council with the information that it needs to respond to any requests that may be made.
Thank you very much. I guess the concern was the response to provide a blanket commitment. That's what got my eye, but you answered the question. Thank you very much. I just have one more regarding question number 6. The question was, there have been allegations of fraud in city contracting around PPE purchased at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of us actually experienced some of those things that felt like fraud in our districts. What specific plans, if any, do you have to prevent fraud and corruption in city contracting, which I thought was an excellent question. Your response was, this is a significant and complex issue and one that highlights the need for DOI to work collaboratively with other city agencies. This problem requires not only an investigative response, and DOI has pursued investigations in this area, including one that resulted in an arrest of a New Jersey man for price gouging for PPE that he was not authorized to sell and could not deliver, but also robust internal corruption prevention practices on an agency-by-agency basis to identify and prevent fraud and corruption in contracting. Those practices were the focus of DOI's annual corruption report last month. I'm going to skip the last paragraph, but my question is, in your written responses, you indicated an interest in better using data analytics to proactively identify potential fraud in city contracting. So can you please describe in more detail how DOI could better use such analytics for this purpose?
Sure. Well, and Speaker Adams, this is something that I hope to learn more about as I immerse myself in the data analytics work that DOI is currently doing. I understand there are 3 relatively new employees at DOI in this role, but the city collects vast amounts of data on expenditures, on needs, on invoices. I mean, there's, and I again haven't seen any of this material yet, but I know that it's out there. And my hope is that potentially through the use of algorithmic programs that can be run, excuse me, over vast amounts of data, we will be able to develop a way to identify what I would call red flags, not conclusive indicia of wrongdoing, but a suggestion that there might be something amiss, and would be able to target our investigative efforts more efficiently as a result, as opposed to doing spot checks, for example, or interviews with various people where we don't have a targeted basis to do so. So it's another way in potentially to investigations in this area beyond complaints that might be made, reports that might be made to DOI, for example.
Thank you very much. I consider that very forward-thinking in the needs of DOI and the things that we're looking to, to promote forward the best practices and efficiencies for DOI. So thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and welcome. And I have a few questions as well. My first one is, can you just provide us some detail about how you would avoid perception of bias in an investigation of the mayoral administration, since, of course, the mayor is the one who appoints this position? What will you, well, let's start there. Could you just give us some comfort about how you will tackle any sort of perception or reality of bias in an investigation of a city agency, of the mayor's office, or any entity that, of course, is related to folks who are appointing you and putting you in that seat today?
Sure, I'm happy to address that because I think we all agree that DOI's independence is really critical to its work, to any investigator's work, to be able to be and be viewed as fair and impartial. I think the way that you do that is you do your job when you're doing your investigations. And by that I mean, you do follow the facts where they lead. You don't fail to pursue an investigative angle because it might expose any particular person, any particular target, or any particular issue. And investigations, once begun, when thoughtfully done, have a momentum of their own. Facts lead to other facts, documents you review lead to questions you need to ask of various people. And if you are faithful to those facts, then your investigations will be fair and impartial, and they will not turn or bend or stop because they happen upon a particular target of any kind, any person in any position. So I think doing the work that way is the best way to dispel any concern that there might be a lack of independence or a fear of pursuing certain targets. And I can assure you that is how I would intend to do the job if confirmed. In terms of the public perception of that, which I think is also very important because the public needs to know that DOI is doing its job as a watchdog. It's an important part of trust in government, which I think is a very important thing, especially now. And I think you do that by being as transparent as you can about the work that you're doing. Now, often in the context of an investigation, that transparency doesn't come until the investigation is concluded. And indeed, you wouldn't want to be transparent along the way because you might be looking at a target that turns out to not have done anything wrong. And you wouldn't want to unfairly, tar that person, smear that person in the press as being the subject of an investigation, which has a very significant negative effect. But I do think by being mindful of being as transparent as possible in your reports and in your public statements, you will assure the public to the extent that you can while maintaining the necessary confidentiality that you're doing your job in the right way, the independent way, which is really the only way that DOI can function effectively.
Thank you for that answer. And there's a perception that the city council members, independently elected officials, and some city employees are treated differently than the mayor and top city hall aides. This isn't about one administration or another, but just in general over the course of time in DOI investigations. You've answered part of that, obviously, but can you give us more sort of sense of how you might change that public perception and give comfort to folks that if that is the reality or the perception, that will be changed over the course of time while you're at the DOI?
I mean, I think fundamentally it's the same practice of sort of day in and day out doing your job the right way and keeping your focus on the facts and on DOI's mission, which is finding those facts as they pertain to corruption, fraud, waste, and abuse. There's other proactive work that DOI does when it goes out to agencies, for example, to speak about prevention of corruption. So there are other ways that DOI can speak about its mission, but I think in terms of assuring that its investigations are fair and impartial, it's to do them in that way and then to be as transparent with the public as is appropriate given the nature of the job about the work that you're doing.
Yep, appreciate that. You had mentioned, I think the speaker mentioned as one of her questions around whistleblower protections and ways in your interest in strengthening whistleblower protections under city law. And I note that we did I had a bill, and I think we passed the law last year, that was to strengthen those protections around city contractors of a certain amount of money to make sure they also have obligations. Do you have other areas where you might identify today, I know you haven't taken office yet, but where you might identify areas where you feel there's a need to strengthen protections for whistleblowers?
So I think to answer that question, I need to be sort of in the job and doing the work and speaking with the folks on the ground who are dealing with people who are sharing information. And although there is whistleblower protection, anytime anyone does that, they are doing it at some personal risk. I am very much in favor of the expansions that I understand, this council has included in the whistleblower law over the last, 10 or 15 years. And I look forward to considering whether there are ways that we could either strengthen the existing protection or clarify it. But I don't feel like I'm in a position yet to have an informed view on that and to offer suggestions. But I think it's a very important area, and we've talked about the importance of DOI's independence to it doing its work. Another very important component, and this is related to independence, is that individuals feel like they can come forward and provide information, and they'll be treated with respect and taken seriously and entitled to all the legal protections that they thereby obtain under the law. And so taking that commitment seriously, and DOI has done, as you know, investigations of violations of the whistleblower protection law, is also very important to the continued functioning and effectiveness of DOI.
Good. And I would note that I believe your predecessor had testified to council at some point in the last few years on some other recommendations, so you might want to go back and look at in terms of ways to strengthen it, things I think have turned into some legislation here at the City Council as well. On the topic of your predecessor, in 2020, your predecessor had recommended, in response, a report was responding to the George Floyd protests and policing here in the city, recommended removing, so combining the DOI's NYPD Inspector General, the CCRB, and the Commission to Combat Police Corruption into a single entity. Do you agree with that recommendation?
So I've looked at the report. Obviously, I've studied it. I'm sure I could study it more. It's a very thorough sort of scholarly work, I think, and that recommendation was made after consulting with a number of different folks with direct experience with the CCRB, with the work that the OIG for NYPD does. Again, I think this is an area where, and I should also say that the concern that was expressed that having 3 overlapping bodies is not efficient, that there can be competition, that there can be challenges in obtaining necessary information, and no central, individual to go to for that information. I think those are all real concerns, and concerns at a conceptual level that I take very seriously as well. I mean, certainly efficiency and the streamlining of processes is something that's very important to DOI as a general matter. In terms of whether or not I agree with the specific recommendation, I would like to have some time, if I'm confirmed in the role, to speak to more of the folks involved, to speak to people at DOI. There's a great deal in the report, but I'd like to have some, sort of one-on-one conversations to try to get a better sense of what my view is and to ask some questions about the costs and benefits of the alternative. So I can certainly say that conceptually, I think the recommendations are sound and the goals they express are ones that I share. I would want to understand, among other things, how the oversight body that's proposed would work in practice. There's some recommendation in the report about how its members would be appointed. I'd like to understand in a more granular way what that would look like before expressing a view. And obviously I will say that position as it currently exists in DOI, because legislative changes would be required to affect that recommendation, will continue to be obviously a very important component of the work that we do, and that will continue, unchanged until this council or others see fit to make a legislative change.
Great, I appreciate that. I think I note that we also need to fill that position at the IG, I think, in the office. I think the individual left recently. We'll call on other colleagues. I believe we're starting with Councilmember Salamanca.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. And I would like to congratulate both of you guys on your nomination. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know this is much better here. I just have some very basic questions for you. So DOI is in charge of background checks for city employees. And throughout my time in government, at times they have worked at a very snail pace in terms of the background checks. How do you plan on improving that process?
Yeah, I think that's a really important issue. So what I know about this issue historically is that my predecessor made a significant effort, including reorganizing the background unit, to make the process more efficient. And I think those efforts were successful, but I also think we can all agree that they could be even more efficient and should be more efficient, you know, especially for particularly sensitive positions. You know, you can think about, there are lots of examples, but folks who are in daycare centers, for example, you know, other situations where there are vulnerable people involved that they're dealing with. So I will say that I don't have an answer for you as I sit here today about how the process could be made more efficient. I think it is certainly a goal to make it more efficient. And that's something that I want to study at DOI, consult with the background unit about, you know, speak to folks about, and think about what we could do to build on the improvements that I think have already been made, but I'm sure could be further improved upon.
Okay, thank you. Here you mentioned about ways to be proactive, lectures and other means to educate city agencies on identifying corruption and potential fraud. I know here in the council annually we need to take some type of seminar classes that our conflict of interest training that we have to do yearly. What are your plans in terms of that proactive work with city agencies to kind of educate them on do's and don'ts?
Well, I think the ongoing, I would guess you could call it a lecture process or a series, I think that's been very effective in not only providing information, but what I've found certainly in other contexts is when you provide people with information about potential legal risks, compliance risks, and violations, that can also prompt reporting of complaints. So it's not just that hopefully they're more mindful of these issues or think about ways to improve their own compliance, but they may also then appreciate that something they've observed or been aware of that they might not have thought was an issue is actually an issue and something that's worth reporting. So I think that is a process that we should continue. You know, I think on an agency by agency basis, the types of training that an agency wants to offer is within their purview, but I think the sort of overview that we can give of the issues as we see them from DOI's perspective can help an agency build on those trainings and their own internal policies and procedures.
All right. One of your biggest oversights is appointing inspector generals throughout certain city agencies. One that stands out for me here, of course, is NYPD, but also the Department of Corrections. And you know, throughout the last couple of years, I'm pretty sure you've read the issues that we've had in Rikers Island and the other jails that we have throughout the city of New York. And just recently, there was a report that during COVID, there was an increase of drug seizures in these city jails, yet visits were limited. So therefore, we know that these narcotics are coming in, obviously through non-visitors, so must be employees. What is your plan on addressing this?
So I think I may have just seen the same report, which was relatively recent. I think this is a good example of an issue where the article suggests that there may be, it may be coming in. I think the article's, you know, query was, is it coming in through corrections officers? There were some other sides of the story in the article. Maybe something was coming in through the mail. Maybe, you know, there were some other alternatives that were offered. So it certainly seems, you know, like an issue that may warrant further scrutiny. This is, again, the kind of thing where, and in terms of dealing with the Department of Corrections in general, I want to really spend some time with the folks at DOI, the Inspector General, you know, the folks who are on the ground, and can, you know, give me more of an in-depth briefing on how they see the circumstances. I hope that within its jurisdiction, DOI can be a positive agent for change. And I certainly have seen, you know, the public articles about these issues over the last couple months. Exactly what form that would take is something that, you know, I'll want to dig in and learn more about if I'm confirmed.
All right. And my last question, if possible, during these DOI background checks, employees many times have to pay for these background checks. And some of these employees, their income is not at that level. Is there a way, once you're confirmed, that you can review the fees that are being charged for the employees and maybe create some type of scale where employees at a different salary base will be charged less than other employees that can actually afford these fees that are being charged?
So that's a great question. This is not an issue that I've thought about. I could certainly see from a fairness and proportionality perspective that scaling fees to correlate with someone's anticipated salary makes sense. How feasible that is and sort of what drives the fee structure is not something I'm yet familiar with, but I'm very happy to take a look at that issue, and I certainly think it's it's an important point to address.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We're now going to go to Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you. And thank you for being here today and the opportunity to speak with you recently as well. Just wanting, as I mentioned before, the DOI commissioner is a very important role in ensuring that we root out conflicts, corruption, and what have you. And it's super important to ensure that someone in that position is free from all perception, as we spoke about, of bias. And so just on the record, I'd like to have you state, just as you told me before, that how you would handle a case or a matter that had a perception of bias.
Sure. So if I became aware of any investigation where I thought, and I take it your question is directed to any bias that I might have, the first thing I would do would be to consult with the general counsel at DOI and seek their guidance. There's also the possibility of seeking guidance from the Conflict of Interest Board, depending on the issue. And I would always, in all circumstances, want to follow the guidance that I received to the letter, to be aware of and alert to these issues immediately. I agree with you that it is important in general and particularly important at DOI given my role. So my plan would be to consult, seek guidance, and then act on that guidance, to the letter to make sure that I was conducting myself in the most appropriate way.
And I know that a question came up in terms of membership on not-for-profit boards. And even as council members, we, in taking the role as council members, have had to withdraw ourselves from boards and to remove any potential conflict. And while it may not be required, in certain instances, it often removes any question of it. So if that was a matter that faced you, would you be willing to remove yourself from a not-for-profit board?
If I was on a board where there was any, again, I would seek guidance, and if I would seek guidance from, in this case, from COIB, and I would follow their advice. If there was a reason, for example, a strong concern that I had or that this council had that related to a particular issue, I would also want to seriously consider that as well in making a decision about whether or not to resign.
Also, how will you oversee agencies like HPD to ensure that their contracts are enforced and adhered to? I've found since being council member, there have been moments where there are existing city programs that require citizens to, that buy into these programs to follow a particular contract, but the agency itself does not. So how would you handle matters like that?
So I think that's an area where I would want to know a little bit more about the specific issue, and I would want to educate myself more, again, through speaking with the Inspector General on the ground, who covers that agency, to get guidance about what they're seeing, what they're thinking, and then develop a plan to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I go to the next individual, just wanted to, on the record, be more clear about the two conflicts I think have been asked and addressed. You are sitting on two boards right now. I think you're familiar with those, which the two they are. The Brearley School, located on the Upper East Side. I love the Upper East Side. And, of course, Public Color, another fantastic organization funded here by the city. Can you just give us a sense of how you're planning to handle those resignations from those boards, or how you're planning to handle your membership on those boards on the record?
Sure, and I want to be very clear in my view on this. So I have resigned from, or committed to resign from the Public Color Board in light of initial indications from the Conflict of Interest Board that that's a complicated situation to manage, given the many touch points with the city. I have received just today in writing from the Conflicts of Interest Board their determination, and I should note it's not a formal opinion of the board, but a view of the council to the board, that I could remain on the school board that you mentioned, consistent with Chapter 68. However, if there is a strong concern on the part of this council, as I said, about that membership, although it is obviously, like all things, and like the memberships that you all had as well, I'm sure personally important to me, and in this case to my family, given the nature of the connection, I am prepared to resign from that board as well. So I do want to make sure that my position on that is very clear.
I appreciate it. I believe members have a copy of the letter as well from Quaid. We're going to move over to Councilmember Brewer, and then I think Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your reach out previous to this hearing. One of the questions I have, I think there's lots of ways of approaching this job, and you certainly outlined your concept, and it's excellent. But one of the challenges, and sort of picking up maybe earlier with Councilmember Sanchez's idea about how to be proactive, and one of the ways to do that was done by some previous DOI commissioners and not others. So the question, I think, as you know, is when you have perhaps, as was mentioned earlier with correction, but there are many others, a potential systemic issue. How would you approach that in terms of the public, a report? Obviously, unfortunately, you're going to find that there are people who commit acts that are not appropriate to their job, and et cetera, and you have to investigate that. But then there's the other, which is a more systemic approach. So I'm wondering if you plan to do that. These are what I would call public reports, different than what we talked about earlier. And I wanted to know if you think that's part of the job, and if that's something that you would look to as a DOI commissioner.
Yes, I absolutely think that public reports are part of the job, and sometimes those reports are about a single issue, and sometimes they are about a series of events that have reflected or highlighted a broader issue. You know, for example, security lapses at the jails that allowed drugs and guns to come in, just to give an example of a recent, the subject of a report, relatively recent report. So I think that one of the things that's very appealing to me about this work is that it allows you to do both things. You are certainly going to pursue individual acts of wrongdoing that relate to corruption, waste, and abuse. But you also have the opportunity, through your broader purview, to look at all of the situations you're seeing, to study issues at a higher level, and to, where appropriate, prepare reports that include recommendations for procedural and policy changes that can improve that issue. And I think, sometimes those things go together. Sometimes you have a report where there's no enforcement action against an individual. But I think that to do the job requires pursuing, both aspects.
Okay. And I assume that there are reports that have been made in the past where there have been recommendations and they have not been fulfilled. Is that something that you would look at to see if there are undone opportunities to commit better public policy? Is that something that you would look at in terms of past commissioners?
Absolutely, and I believe there is publicly available information about the recommendations that have been made by DOI and the extent to which they have or have not been fulfilled. DOI certainly has that information, I should say. I think at least some of it is also public. And I completely agree that given that our authorization is not to demand those changes, but only to recommend them, the practice of following up, ensuring that they're being followed, if they're not, figure out why not, is something that I think is very important. So yes, I agree with that, and that is something that I would do.
Our council probably knows this, but obviously we have agencies like Housing Authority, Department of Education, Health and Hospitals, slightly different than the usual city agency. Would you also commit to working with their inspector generals or DOI to see how even more aggressive, perhaps, there would be an oversight of what they're up to? Because I don't want to talk about NYCHA. I have great respect for it, but there's always a million issues at NYCHA, for example.
So it seems to me, if I'm understanding the question right, I think, you know, DOI has a responsibility and an obligation with respect to all agencies. You know, obviously, like every agency, we have limited resources, and one of the reasons I mentioned the data analytics point is that I think prioritizing what we're going to pursue is going to be very important. And as I said in some of my written answers, although it's a somewhat general statement, I am interested in doing things that are impactful, right? Using our resources in a way that really helps New York City and its residents. But I don't think there's any agency where I wouldn't want to undertake, you know, investigations where necessary, exercise our oversight responsibility where necessary.
Okay, because I think DOE has a special situation with a special school commissioner, and that would be something to also look at. Just finally, we're all interested in independence. Obviously, it came up with the Corporation Counsel, and it comes up with you. Do you, sort of to pick up on some of the ways that you answered your questions, can you just reiterate how you would see independence? You could get questions from the outside about somebody in the mayor's office. You obviously don't want anybody to taint how you do your investigations, et cetera. Can you just talk about how you would be independent?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, with certain types of investigations, they really can't be shared with anyone outside of DOI. That could be because you might compromise ongoing covert investigative activity. It might be because, you know, there are, you know, folks involved at the agency potentially in the misconduct, and you wouldn't be able to share the nature of your investigation. So, you know, that's a situation where that's one way of foreclosing interference. You know, obviously, to the extent, and I'm certainly not expecting this to happen, but if I was ever asked to delay or limit an investigation, I simply would not do that. I also think that with those concerns, you know, aside, there is room, as I said, for collaboration. I think it's important for DOI to understand and have relationships with the other city agencies so that it has an understanding of what's going on, what the issues are. If we're making policy or procedural recommendations, obviously we have to make sure that they're well suited to the agency. The mayor's office, like this council, can direct DOI to undertake investigations, so there's obviously going to be a need for communication there. And I think maybe the most important way to preserve independence is to always use your own independent judgment and to base that judgment on the facts that you're finding and what the law is, and really on nothing else, no outside influence, but really your own judgment on that issue. And that is how I would pursue the job.
Thank you. I'm excited about your interest in data analytics. It's something that I pursued as the author of the Open Data Bill, and I look forward to that topic. Thank you very much.
I do too. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have questions from Councilmember Sanchez.
Great. Good afternoon now. So my question is actually a very brief one, and it's with respect to your answer to number 9, which is the council has important oversight responsibilities. How would you envision working with the council to ensure that DOI and the council's respective oversight functions can coexist smoothly and productively? And your response was that you look forward to working with the council's Committee on Oversight Investigation, chair of which is to my right, Councilmember Gail Brewer. And so my question is just about partnership with the other committees on the council, who will be also working in partnership with, of course, the Committee on Oversight Investigation. We're all, constantly performing oversight, so it's kind of just a word choice kind of question, but would love to hear about your, plans to work with the rest of us in other committees.
Well, I very much appreciate the question. I think I said principally, so I certainly didn't mean to exclude any other committees of this council. And really, I think it's an important question, because I think our role is always to listen to concerns that are raised and to act appropriately on those concerns. And I would want to make sure that we were able to have that dialogue and to hear issues that are being identified in any committee that seem, appropriate for DOI's consideration. So the answer is of course, and I was not intending to exclude other committees in that statement. So thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The Committee on Housing and Buildings looks forward to working with you if confirmed. And congratulations on your nominations to both.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for both of your testimonies, and congratulations on your nominations as well, and thank you for answering questions for us. We're going to now open up the floor to the public for comments. Comments are 2 minutes per person. Council, are there any members of the public who are present here to speak? Okay, I'm told now. Well, I want to thank both of you, and do we have somebody? I think we have an individual coming down right now. Thank you. We'll put 2 minutes on the clock, and if you can just state your name at the beginning as well. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Tawaki Komatsu. I talked to you previously, Mr. Powers. I also talked to you, Gail Brewer, on September 26, 2017, and September 28, 2017, about public town hall meetings that I was illegally prevented from attending. You told me on September 26 that you were going to look into that. On September 28th, you said something to the effect of maybe I was being difficult.
Sorry, are you testifying about the nominations today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I made complaints to DOI previously. The Law Department's Corporation Counsel is in charge of the defendant's attorneys in my federal court litigation. So I was hoping to have a conversation about what commitment the two of you have, as was discussed today by Ms. Brewer, about trying to reduce the number of lawsuits that are filed against the city when city public officials violate First Amendment rights, 14th Amendment rights in regards to public forums. You talked about open data, open meetings, and yet, like I stated, I told you when it was happening that I was being illegally prevented from attending these public forums. You said you would look into it. That practice continued long after you and I had those conversations. So the question is, if someone like Ms. Brewer is a chairwoman of the Oversight Committee, where can people like me possibly expect to have any oversight when we have these conversations more than 3 years ago and these practices are still happening? I had a conversation recently with Federal Judge Edgardo Ramos about a week ago in regards to the fact Penny Ringel, he yet again violated my First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights at a public meeting on November 16th last year, and that was the first time I had a conversation with Mayor Adams. So the point is, all this started from a bait and switch regards to a lease agreement So I signed an apartment lease agreement. You talked about real estate today. And HRA changed my lease agreement 2 days after I signed it. I got more than 15 punches to my head.
Okay, we'll talk. We will have individuals talk to you. You're off the clock. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other individuals here from the public? I don't believe so. Well, once again, thank you, both of you, and congratulations on your nominations. And thank you to everyone here who came and participated in today's hearing. We are now recessed today's hearing and reconvene on Thursday, February 24th for a vote on these nominations. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you then.